What would you do if you spent a decade paying off your first apartment, only to walk in and find your parents waiting with a lawyer, a folder, and a number you don't recognize? No hugs. No, we're proud of you. Just, you owe us. It's time to give back. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just walked to my room and started collecting everything they didn't know I still controlled. By the time they came for me again, the locks had changed. That morning, I made the final mortgage payment on my apartment. It wasn't a mansion, just a quiet one-bedroom condo with a small balcony that caught the morning light. But to me, it was a fortress, a sanctuary, a lifetime carved out from sweat-skipped coffees, secondhand coats, and years of saying no to what everyone else took for granted. I'm a software engineer, 28. I speak fluent Python and C++. I live by systems, rules, logic. The world makes sense in code, black and white, no gaslighting, no you misunderstood. Unlike people. That morning at work, we had just finished a massive upgrade on the back end. Everyone was laughing, ordering coffee, breathing for the first time in weeks. I slipped out early before the sun dipped. Driving home, the city looked softer than usual. I felt something rare relief. Not joy, not celebration, just the slow, quiet exhale of someone who's been holding everything in for far too long. When I opened the door to my apartment, it smelled like fresh paint and a new chapter. I tossed my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, my tiny, victorious ritual. I remember standing there for a second, still in my coat, staring at the boxes I hadn't fully unpacked. I whispered to myself, "You did it, Ellie. That's me, Ellie Nguyen. I didn't throw a party, didn't pop champagne. I ordered a greasy pepperoni pizza and a bottle of ginger ale. Sat on the hardwood floor back against the wall pizza box open, scrolling my phone. That's when the intercom buzzed. It was a mail carrier, certified letter, needed a signature. I assumed it was something about the property deed. I ran down barefoot, signed the electronic pad, and took the heavy, stiff envelope upstairs. It looked like something from a bank or a court. Still chewing a slice, I opened it. Letterhead Willix Crane and Associates. Never heard of them. Then the first line stopped my breath. On behalf of our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Allen and Tuyet Nguyen, my parents. I froze, my thumb still pressed to the corner of the paper. The pizza suddenly tasted like cardboard. I kept reading. The legal phrases hit like fists. Breach of verbal agreement. Unjust enrichment. Demand for repayment of Parent Plus loans. The total $104 $212 plus interest. I felt the blood drain from my face. Then came the kicker. Failure to arrange repayment within 30 days will result in wage garnishment and legal lien on current property. They were coming for my salary, my apartment, the very life I built from zero, from ramen noodles and broken shoes and working 2 jobs in college. I stared at the letter so long the room around it disappeared. I didn't cry, but my hands trembled. Because this wasn't some phishing scam. This was real, formal, calculated. My parents weren't confused. They'd lawyered up, filed paperwork, planned this. They didn't even call me. They sent a law firm. And the irony that morning, I stood in my kitchen and told myself I was finally free. But freedom apparently was never mine to claim. I sat there for hours. The pizza went cold, the ginger ale warm. The silence of my apartment stopped being peaceful. It became suffocating. And slowly a thought started digging its claws into the edges of my mind. Wait, the Stanford letter, the full scholarship, the one they told me I didn't get, that I'd only received partial aid and we couldn't afford it. I remembered the kitchen table, the yellow notepad, my dad crunching made-up numbers, my mom's soft voice saying, "We just want what's best for you." I believed them. I gave up my dream school and went to state. I worked 30-plus hours a week. I studied through migraines. I slept in my childhood bed while my brother got dorm parties and study abroad programs. And now they were suing me for that A debt built on a decision they forced me into. A sharp, nauseating wave of clarity washed over me. This wasn't a mistake. This was the first shot in a war they'd been planning for years, and it was time I stopped being the understanding daughter and started being their equal. Part 2, English. I used to think that if I was quiet enough, good enough, low maintenance enough, things would work out. No one ever tells you. When you're the easy daughter, people assume you need nothing. I was that daughter. 18 years old, hair tied back, wearing a borrowed button-up shirt for my college interview photo, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights prepping for the SAT. I wrote my application essay with everything I had not to escape poverty, but to earn the right to choose my future. Stanford was that dream. Not for the prestige, but for its world-class engineering program. A place where no one would tell me you're good at math for a girl, or maybe consider something more manageable. When the letter came, I held it like it might shatter in my hands. First word. "Congratulations," I screamed out loud, ran down the hallway and into the kitchen, letter flapping like a victory flag. "Mom, Dad." I got in. I got into Stanford. They didn't cheer. My mom was arranging flowers. She looked up with a tight smile. My dad didn't even stand. He sat with bills spread out on the table, slowly removing his reading glasses. Well, he said carefully, "That's nice. But let's be realistic." The temperature in the room dropped. "They gave me aid," I said, confused. "It's a really big package. I think maybe it's almost a full ride." That's when he pulled out the yellow legal pad. I remember it vividly. He flipped it open like it was a court file, started scribbling tuition, housing, health insurance, flights, textbooks. Then came the inflation. "Here's what people don't factor in," he said, clicking his calculator. "Laundry, dorm supplies, storage over summer, international student insurance just in case." The number ballooned. My mom placed her hand gently over mine. Cool fingers, soft voice. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart, really. But even with aid, it's not enough. There's still a huge gap, and we just can't take that on." I stared at the legal pad. The numbers didn't seem right, but I nodded. I didn't fight. Maybe we could apply for loans. I offered, my voice small. Just enough to cover the rest. My dad shook his head, full of fatherly regret. "Our credit won't hold, and we'd never want you saddled with 6 figures of debt." He tapped the bottom of the page like it was final. "The state school is excellent. You can live at home. We'll help with books, gas, groceries. We'll be a team, together." It wasn't a decision. It was a verdict, and I accepted it. I went upstairs, folded the Stanford letter back into its envelope, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, underneath old birthday cards and forgotten notebooks. It stayed there for years, untouched. What I didn't realize was that day in the kitchen wasn't just a disappointment, it was theft. Because a few months later, my brother Liam came home grinning like he'd won the lottery. "We need a family meeting," Mom called out, her voice practically singing. That night, she laid out pamphlets on the table. Liam had been accepted to a prestigious private college in the Northeast. My jaw tightened. I thought, we couldn't afford out of state. My dad puffed his chest. "Well, we've done some creative financial planning. Your mother and I are going to make it work. We'll downsize later, put off retirement if we have to. But this is an investment in his future." The hypocrisy hit me like a slap. I looked at Liam. He didn't meet my eyes. He was smart, just not driven. No AP classes, no volunteering, no sleepless nights writing essays. But he got the dream. And I got a cramped room, weekend shifts, and cheap textbooks. I spent the next 4 years commuting from home to a state university. I worked at a grocery store during the day and coded freelance gigs at night. On weekends, I took the night shift at a call center that reeked of burnt coffee and fluorescent fatigue. I'd come home to a dark house, my back aching, my eyelids heavy. Sometimes I'd pass my parents in the hallway. They'd smile. "You're such a hard worker, Ellie. We're so proud." And I believed them. Believed them when they said, maybe Liam just needed the extra push. Believed them when they said I was more independent. I told myself I was lucky to be strong. Lucky to be the one they didn't have to help. But deep down, a question haunted me. What if they lied? What if that scholarship wasn't partial? What if they took my win and gave it to someone else? Now staring at the lawsuit demanding over $150,000 for loans they claimed were taken for my education, I realized this wasn't guilt. It was a pattern, and it was time I stopped carrying it. The morning after the letter, I called in sick. I didn't eat, didn't shower. I opened my laptop, sat on the floor with my knees to my chest, and started digging. My parents thought I'd panic, that I'd pay quietly, that I'd feel shame. What they didn't count on was that I'm a programmer. I live in code patterns data, and I remember everything. First step, Stanford. I dug through my old Gmail account, the one I used during high school. Forgotten under layers of spam and scholarship alerts was a message with the subject line, "Your financial aid summary, Office of Undergraduate Admission." My hands shook as I clicked. It opened a PDF. I read it twice, then a third time. Awarded full tuition, housing, meal plan, health services, total cost covered 100%. My heart stopped. It wasn't a partial scholarship. It was a full ride, and they knew. They saw this. Intercepted the letter. Read the same email I was now staring at. But when I had asked, they told me I hadn't qualified, and I believed them. I didn't cry, I just stared. At the cold official confirmation of a life I should have had. They didn't just deny me a dream, they stole it. Then turned it into a lawsuit. My next move was Rachel. Rachel Tran was my closest friend in college, a pre-law major turned civil rights attorney, smart, focused, allergic to BS. We hadn't talked much in the past year, life gets busy, but I sent her a message I think my parents committed fraud using my name. I have proof. Can I show you something? She responded in less than 5 minutes. I met her that afternoon, documents printed and highlighted. She read in silence. Then she looked up, her face pale. "Ellie, this isn't just shady, this is criminal." She explained everything. Parent Plus loans are federal. You can't take them out without consent. Even if they forged my signature or pretended to be acting on my behalf, it was fraud. And if they used my scholarship to leverage other financial products, investments, second mortgages, that could be federal wire fraud, tax evasion, even identity theft. We drafted a formal response to the lawsuit. Then Rachel gave me a mission, find out what else they used my name for. So I started digging. First, I requested my financial aid history from the Department of Education. Then I checked my credit report, something I hadn't done in over a year. And there it was. A federal loan issued in 2015, Parent Plus, $162,000, linked to my FAFSA, using their tax info, but no signature from me, nothing authorizing the loan, no record that I'd ever touched it. But the kicker. The loan had been deferred until now. The moment I paid off my apartment, the moment I finally had assets to seize, they made their move. It was never about fairness. It was about timing. They let the interest balloon sat on the lie for years, then struck when I had something to take. Rachel filed a motion to dismiss, but she warned me they won't give up. Be ready. She was right. My mother called first. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice trembling. "We heard from your lawyer. We're just confused. Why are you being so aggressive? Can't we just talk, just the three of us?" Then came the guilt. "We raised you, Ellie. We gave everything. I gave up vacations, jewelry, new clothes, just so you could have a future." What she didn't say. A future we chose. A version that worked for us. Then came the texts. From aunts, uncles, even cousins I hadn't seen in years. "Your mom's heartbroken. You're tearing the family apart. Whatever happened, you should be grateful. Grateful for lies, for giving up Stanford." For years of silence and second place, I stayed quiet, blocked numbers, kept digging. Then late one night, I remembered something strange. Back in high school, my mom was obsessed with this online parenting forum. She would post constantly, usually bragging about Liam or asking for advice. The site was old, outdated. I hadn't thought about it in years. But what if she posted about me? I searched the forum name. It was still online, barely. Broken links, ancient design, but the archives still viewable. I remembered her username, VNMom888. It took 2 hours of scrolling. Then I found it, a post from April 2015, titled Parenting Dilemma: Use Full Ride for One Kid or Support Both Equally. She wrote, "Our daughter just got a full ride to Stanford, but our son is struggling. He'll need more support. It's tempting to redirect some of her financial aid potential toward the family's bigger picture. We're debating taking a loan under her FAFSA while encouraging her to stay closer to home. Is that unethical or just realistic parenting?" My stomach turned. I saved the post, archived the link, screenshot, timestamp, everything. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was premeditated. They had the full scholarship. They saw the opportunity, and they chose to take it. I sent it all to Rachel. She didn't reply immediately, but 2 hours later, she messaged me one line. "This changes everything." At first, I thought the worst was behind me. The scholarship proof, the archived forum, post the fraudulent loan record, we had facts. We had leverage. But truth doesn't always win by itself, not in families like mine, because the next battle wasn't legal, it was emotional, and it started with a group text. Family dinner, Sunday, 6 p.m. Everyone expected, no excuses. It was from my dad. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, but the message was sharp, cold, like I was a soldier who'd gone rogue, not a daughter who'd been wronged. I didn't reply. That Sunday, while they sat around the table clinking chopsticks and passing judgment, I ordered takeout and stayed home. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed messages, screenshots, photos. One from a cousin holding a plate of spring rolls with the caption, "Too bad Ellie couldn't make it. Maybe next time she won't bring a lawyer." Another, a blurry selfie of my parents, smiling tight smiles with the words, "Love wins, blood is thicker." It was theater. I scrolled numb until I found the worst one, a Facebook post, public, from my mother. "Sometimes the children you sacrifice everything for turn around and treat you like enemies, but we still pray for healing. We still love." Hundreds of likes. Comments from church friends, neighbors, old co-workers. "You raised them too well. Such a shame the younger generation has no respect. You're saints for staying graceful." I didn't know what stung more, the manipulation or how easily people bought it. Rachel told me to stay silent. They're trying to provoke a reaction, she warned. Don't give them a quote they can twist. So I did nothing but silence. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like surrender. Until one day I got a call from my old piano teacher, Miss Kim. She was in her 70s, gentle voice always smelled like jasmine and peppermint tea. She said, "Ellie, I know I shouldn't ask, but I just saw something your mother posted. I don't understand. You were always the one who held everything together." My throat closed. "I'm sorry, Ms. Kim," I said quietly. "I can't explain everything, but I promise you I didn't change. They just finally showed me who they were." There was a long pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes being the good one just means you were the quietest target." That line stayed with me, because she was right. I wasn't the rebel, wasn't the loud one, wasn't the screw-up. I was the one who made my own meals, did my own laundry, got straight A's, and never asked for anything. So they gave me nothing. And now when I finally fought back, they painted me as cruel, ungrateful, cold. But I was done carrying their story, done apologizing for defending myself. I blocked the entire family group chat, muted my mother's Facebook, turned off message requests. I wasn't running away. I was building walls for the first time in my life, not to keep love out, but to keep poison from leaking back in. Still, the court case dragged on. They didn't back down. Their lawyer doubled down on verbal agreements, claimed my parents had always intended to repay the loan together, that I had benefited from their guidance meals, emotional labor. Rachel built our defense like a fortress. We filed motion after motion, lined up documentation like dominoes. But emotionally, it felt like trench warfare. Every move I made, they fired back. Emails from relatives, phone calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Just talk to them. They're still your parents. They're getting old. Do you really want them to die thinking you hate them? What no one asked was, did they ever worry what it would do to me? How it felt to wake up in a life they stole then sued me for? How it felt to eat dinner alone in an apartment they tried to take? There were nights I sat on the floor staring at blank walls, asking myself, is it worth it? Wouldn't it be easier to just let them win, pay something, settle, get peace back? But then I'd remember Stanford, the letter, the full ride, the life they ripped away with a soft smile and forged numbers. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my name back, my voice, my dignity, my freedom. They weren't going to give it to me, so I kept fighting, not with rage, but with truth. With every file we uncovered, every call to the Department of Ed, every old email we dug up that contradicted their claims, until finally Rachel looked at me and said, "We have enough." And I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I believed I might win. Court was quiet, not the dramatic courtroom drama you see on Netflix. No slamming gavels, no shouting matches, just fluorescent lights, stale carpet, and legalese spoken like a second language no one enjoys. My parents sat on the opposite side of the aisle, my dad in his stiff gray suit, my mom clutching a pale pink handbag like a baby. Neither of them looked at me. I didn't expect them to. The judge asked questions. Their lawyer painted a careful narrative. The defendants were under the impression that the financial aid did not fully cover the cost of education. They applied for a Parent Plus loan as a family strategy. They expected mutual understanding and repayment. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. Rachel stood composed as ever. She walked the judge through our evidence like a symphony. The original Stanford letter, the financial aid PDF, screenshots of my untouched FAFSA portal, loan documents showing my name but no signature, the forum post. Yes, the one my mother wrote under the username VNMom8888. It was our crown jewel. Rachel didn't just print it, she submitted metadata logs proving the post date, IP address, and email linked to the account. She even projected the forum post onto the screen. My mother paled. My father's jaw tightened. The courtroom was still every creak of a chair suddenly louder than breath. The judge read the post out loud. Our daughter just got a full ride to Stanford, tempted to redirect some of her financial aid potential for the family's bigger picture. He stopped, looked over his glasses at my parents. Then he looked at me. "Ellie," he said, "did you ever consent to any financial arrangement with your parents regarding your education? No, Your Honor. Did you receive any funds from this Parent Plus loan?" "No, Your Honor," Rachel added quietly. "All the loan disbursements went to an account under the father's name. None to Ellie. She has no access to those funds and never did." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Even the opposing counsel looked strained. Then from the other side of the courtroom a voice cracked. My brother, Liam. He stood suddenly, hands clenched, face red. "I told you not to go this far," he snapped at our father. "You said she'd fold, that it wouldn't go to court." Gasps. Whispers. Even the bailiff blinked. The judge tapped his gavel once. "Please control your witness." But Liam wasn't done. "She never even knew you used her name. You told me she turned it down, that she didn't want Stanford. I believed you." I turned to him, stunned. His voice softened shame, dragging it down. "I didn't know until the lawsuit. I saw the emails, the aid letter. You lied to both of us." My mom's lips parted, but no sound came. The judge called a recess. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "That's it. That's the crack we needed." When we returned, the judge's ruling was swift. Case dismissed. Loan declared fraudulent. Referral made to the Department of Education and IRS for possible criminal investigation. My parents didn't say a word as we left. But outside the courthouse, as I stood in the parking lot, sun on my face, the city moving as if nothing had changed, I heard my father's voice behind me. "You ruined us," he hissed. "You destroyed your own family for pride." I turned, not angrily, not with fire, just calm. "No," I said. I stopped pretending we were one, and then I walked away. No victory speech, no applause, just my footsteps echoing across concrete. Light, free. That night, I returned to my apartment and sat alone at my kitchen table. Same table where I'd read the lawsuit, same chair where I'd once thought the only way to survive was to submit. I stared at the Stanford letter now framed, not as a trophy, as a reminder, a symbol of the future that almost got buried by people who claimed they loved me. But I had one more thing to do. I took out a piece of stationery, wrote 3 lines, no emotion, just fact. This is the last time I will explain myself. I did not destroy our family. You did that the moment you turned love into a ledger. I folded the letter, slid it into an envelope addressed to their home. No return address. Then I dropped it in the mail and never looked back. Winning in court didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing in the ruins of something you never asked to destroy, only to realize you'd been living in a collapsed building all along. There was no celebration, no champagne, no family dinner suddenly repaired with tears and apologies. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I heard myself again. I moved apartments 6 weeks later, not because I had to, but because I wanted distance from the place where I'd unraveled, where every wall held echoes of whispered doubt, heavy envelopes, and a heart that kept breaking silently in order to be the good daughter. I found a new place in a different city, still small, still modest, but filled with light. I painted the walls sage green, adopted a rescue dog named Milo who had one floppy ear and a habit of leaning his whole body against you when he wanted affection. He reminded me of myself, skittish, but loyal. People think healing happens in big dramatic moments. It doesn't. It happens in Sunday mornings with coffee, in returning library books on time, in finally buying yourself a winter coat without doing math in your head, in lighting a candle and letting it burn just because you want the room to smell like vanilla. Rachel and I stayed close. She called me her favorite client-turned-case study. Sometimes she joked we should write a book. I never said yes, but I didn't say no either. One day, while organizing my files, I found a folder I'd almost forgotten. Inside the Stanford letter, the loan history, printouts of the forum post, the motion to dismiss, my handwritten list of every dollar I'd spent paying off an apartment my parents tried to seize. I stared at it all. Every page was a scar. But I didn't feel anger. I felt done. So I did something I didn't expect. I shredded it. Not in rage, but like someone finally unpacking a bag they'd been forced to carry uphill for years. Piece by piece, the paper turned to ribbons. I burned the rest safely in a metal tray on my balcony. The fire crackled. Milo watched, tilting his head, and when the flames died, I whispered, "You don't own me anymore. Not the papers, not the story, not them. They had taken so much, but they never got the best of me. Because the best of me, my choices, my resilience, my voice, was never theirs to begin with." Months passed. My numbers stayed blocked on their phones, their names unread and untouched in my inbox. But I heard things. From neighbors, from distant cousins. They'd told people I'd cut ties for money, that I was cold, that I'd turned legal against love. And maybe to them, it looked like that. But to me, I didn't burn bridges. I just refused to walk back across ones that were already in flames. One afternoon, a letter came, handwritten, no return address. The handwriting was familiar my mother's, small, sharp, controlled. I didn't open it. I placed it in a drawer. Not to revisit, but as proof I am no longer curious. That's the real freedom, not needing their validation, not waiting for a sentence that begins with, "We're sorry," not checking my phone during holidays or hoping I'm wrong about who they are. I am not wrong. And still, I am not bitter. I make pancakes on Sundays now, just for me. Play Chopin on my secondhand keyboard when it rains. Send birthday cards to myself with notes like, "You are not selfish. You are sovereign." People sometimes ask, "Do you miss them?" I say no. Because what I miss was a version of them that never existed, the fantasy of unconditional love, the myth of parents who protect, not profit. But now I don't need that story anymore. I'm writing a new one, with boundaries, with dignity, with silence not as punishment, but as peace. So if you're reading this and you've been told to be grateful, told that sacrifice is love and silence is loyalty, let me be the one to say, you are allowed to walk away, even from those who raised you, especially when staying means disappearing. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because I loved myself more. And that is not betrayal. That is survival. Have you ever had to walk away from people who told you they loved you but showed you something else entirely? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. And if this spoke to you, like and subscribe. You don't want to miss what comes next. What would you do if your husband humiliated you in front of the men working for you without knowing you were their boss? I sat quietly at the far end of the long mahogany table, my fingers loosely wrapped around a crystal wine glass. Laughter bounced off the chandeliered ceilings, echoing through the dining hall like a performance I'd watched too many times before. But to me, it was just static background noise to a room full of men who thought they knew power. Grant, my husband, raised his glass high, his voice booming over the chatter like he owned the air itself. Well, here's to another month of what should we call it, sweetheart creative unemployment, he said with a smirk, locking eyes with me. The men around him, senior executives in finely pressed suits, burst into laughter. One nearly choked on his scotch. Grant leaned back, satisfied with himself. Maybe you should apply as a receptionist somewhere, Madeline. A little desk job would suit you nicely. More laughter, sharper this time, like glass breaking in my chest. I lowered my gaze, careful to hide the flicker of a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. Let them laugh. Let them think they held all the cards. They had no idea. My name is Madeline Carter. To the world, I'm just a woman living in the shadow of her powerful husband. No title, no job, no legacy of her own. Just a trophy wife with expensive taste and too much time on her hands. That's what they see. What they don't see, what they never saw, is that I am the founder and CEO of Carter Technologies, the very company these men brag about running. The empire they think they built was born from my blood, my grit, my relentless vision. Tonight they see me as small, weak. But tomorrow they'll remember my name, and the world they think belongs to them, I'm about to take it back. He thought I was nothing, because I let him. When I first met Grant Carter, he was magnetic, ambitious, charming in that effortless all-American way that made you want to believe every word he said. And for a while, I did. I let myself believe that he loved me for who I was not, what I had. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that by the time we met, I had already laid the foundation for Carter Technologies. It wasn't a household name then. Just a whisper of an idea fueled by late nights, black coffee, and a fire that refused to go out. I lived small on purpose, rented a modest apartment, drove a beat-up hatchback, wore department store clothes. I told Grant I was a freelance financial consultant. Said I was struggling to find traction in my career. He never questioned it. In those early years, Grant was different, supportive, encouraging. He told me not to give up, that I was brilliant, that my time would come. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe us. So I married him. But something changed. It always does, doesn't it? As he climbed the ranks, first at a small consulting firm, then at Carter Technologies, his tone shifted. The patience faded. The encouragement turned into condescension, the affection into criticism. You have a degree, don't you? Why not put it to use? You're too smart to just sit around mads. I work 12 hours a day. The least you could do is look interested. Subtle at first, then bolder. He stopped introducing me as his wife and started calling me his better half at home, at least. His friends laughed. I smiled, because I needed to know what he'd become when he thought I had nothing to offer. What Grant never realized was that every promotion he received at Carter Technologies, every glowing review, every raise I had signed off on them. He strutted around the office like a king, sipped overpriced coffee in meetings I funded, made decisions in boardrooms I had designed. He built his identity around a company he didn't know I created, and I stayed silent, because I needed to see how far he'd go when he thought the woman beside him was beneath him. The further he rose, the more entitled he became. He started staying out later, took solo trips under the guise of strategy retreats. At parties, he laughed louder, especially when the joke was on me. Madeline still searching for her passion, he once told a room full of my own employees, "I say she should start with a hobby that pays." The words stung. Of course they did. But I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I took notes. I started collecting breadcrumbs, throwaway comments he made at home, late-night phone calls with his network whispers of deals that sounded a little too slick to be clean. I wasn't angry. I was focused, because I wasn't going to just leave him. I was going to expose him, and I wasn't going to do it alone. To take them down, I had to become no one. The day I became Emily Reese, I left everything behind my wardrobe, my name, my voice. I was no longer the wife of Grant Carter, no longer the shadow of a CEO. I was just another woman applying for a job I had already created. It started with a fake resume. Simple, unimpressive. A year of unemployment. A few entry-level jobs that didn't work out. A community college business certificate, just enough to make me seem forgettable. That's what I needed to be for now. I walked into the Carter Technologies building through the front doors, not the private executive elevator I'd once used. The lobby smelled of espresso and ambition, familiar but foreign now. I clutched a thin black folder, took a deep breath, and stepped into the unknown territory of my own creation. The receptionist didn't recognize me. Neither did the elevator guy. Neither did security. Good. The interview room was tucked away on the 7th floor behind a pane of frosted glass and a too-bright overhead light. I waited in a stiff plastic chair while 3 men shuffled inside. I knew all of them Grant's inner circle. Men I had once promoted, men who thought they ruled Carter Technologies. They didn't recognize me. Why would they, Emily Reese, one of them said, without looking up? I nodded. Let's start with this. How long have you been out of work? His tone was flat mechanical, like I was wasting his time. A little over a year, I answered soft and careful. I've been trying to find the right opportunity. Another man leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. You think this is it? We get hundreds of applications from people far more qualified. The third one didn't even pretend to care. He scrolled through his phone, smirking. I caught a glimpse of the screen. A message to Grant. Your wife's look-alike just walked in. Hope she doesn't cry. They were mocking me. Again. Only this time, they thought I was someone else. For the next 15 minutes, they made a sport of it, questioning my resume like it was a joke, tossing out phrases like, maybe aim lower and you're probably more admin material. They never once asked about my skills. They never once saw me. They thought I was nothing. I left the room with hunched shoulders and bowed head exactly as expected, but inside, I was burning, because I had just confirmed what I needed to know. The rot wasn't just Grant. It was his entire ecosystem. This wasn't just personal anymore, it was structural. They had built a culture around ego, cruelty, and silence. And I wasn't going to expose it with a press release. I was going to dismantle it, piece by piece. Over the next few weeks, I stayed undercover. Emily joined team meetings, sat through humiliating feedback sessions, and listened closely in elevators, hallways, and break rooms. I watched talented women get dismissed. I watched engineers get mocked. I watched promotions handed out like party favors to the loudest voices in the room, not the smartest. That's when I knew it was time. I made the call to my private team. We were going deeper. They thought I was done. They didn't know I was just getting started. By the time I took off the Emily Reese name badge for the last time, I wasn't just furious, I was armed. Over the next 12 months, my private team and I worked in the shadows, tracing everything Grant and his circle had touched. My lead investigator was a former federal compliance officer. My cybersecurity expert once tracked down insider trading rings across Silicon Valley. These weren't hobbyists, they were experts. Every week brought new layers of rot-shell companies funneling money out of Carter Technologies. Fake vendor contracts routed through Grant's college buddy in Miami. Lavish vacations in Bali and St. Bart's billed as business development. Emails, voice memos, internal, Slack messages, some damning, some disgusting. What struck me most wasn't the volume of it all. It was how casual they were. These weren't criminal masterminds. They were men drunk on power, so sure of their invincibility that they didn't even try to cover their tracks. But it wasn't just financial, it was cultural decay. I found messages where junior staff were bullied for speaking up, emails mocking a brilliant engineer for not smiling enough, screenshots of women's LinkedIn photos shared in group chats with sleazy comments underneath. It was a boys' club, a toxic, rotting boys' club. One night, buried in an archived HR file from 3 years earlier, I found her name Naomi Brooks. She was a rising star in software engineering, a technical genius, the kind of person who should have been leading teams. Instead, she had been pushed out after refusing to attend a mandatory team-building retreat that was nothing more than a weekend of golf whiskey and executive egos. I remembered her. She had applied for a promotion once. Grant told me she wasn't a good culture fit. I found her current contact info and reached out with a short message, Naomi. I know what they did, and I want to fix it. Can we talk? She didn't respond at first, but 2 days later, my phone rang. There was a long silence on the line before she finally said, I didn't think anyone cared anymore. I did, and I still do. Naomi became my inside voice, the one who helped me understand how the corruption infected every level, how real talent was buried, how fear ruled, how innovation was suffocated by politics. Together, we pieced together a blueprint of what Carter Technologies had become, and more importantly, what it could be again. But before we could rebuild, we had to take it down. The timing had to be flawless, the evidence had to be irrefutable, and the fall had to be public. So we waited, we watched, we refined every file, every folder, every timeline. Grant still came home every night bragging about the empire he thought he controlled, still called me sweetheart with that fake smile, still made little jokes about how I should try yoga or something since you've got the free time. I smiled, I nodded, but inside I was holding the detonator, and the countdown had already begun. The boardroom was filled with suits, smiles, and self-importance until I walked in. It was a Thursday morning, clear skies, light breeze, the kind of day where the world feels quiet before the storm. I didn't take the back elevator. I didn't wear my disguise. I walked straight through the glass doors of Carter Technologies like I had every right to because I did. This time, no name badge, no fake resume, no hunched shoulders, just me. Madeline Carter, founder, CEO, architect of everything these men had built their egos on. Some employees glanced up as I passed. A few gave polite nods, others just looked past me. They didn't know yet, but they would. I took the executive elevator to the 28th floor. The boardroom doors were open. Voices buzzed from inside Grant and his inner circle chuckling about some closed-door deal, oblivious to what was about to happen. I stepped in, and the room stopped breathing. Grant's voice cracked mid-sentence as his eyes landed on me. Confusion danced across his face. Mads. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the head of the table, the seat he usually took, and I sat down, calm, collected, certain. Good morning, I said, placing a thick black folder in front of me. Before we begin, I'd like to reintroduce myself. I reached for the remote. My name is Madeline Carter. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Carter Technologies. A gasp rippled through the room. One man choked on his coffee. Another dropped his pen. Grant's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked around the room searching for backup. He found none. No? He whispered, his voice shaking. This is some kind of joke, right? I clicked the remote. The wall behind me came alive with light. Slide after slide filled the screen: emails, wire transfers, private messages, receipts, surveillance footage, payments to non-existent vendors, corporate funds used for personal travel, data leaks sold to competitors, offensive messages exchanged between executives. It was all there. For the past 2 years, I said clearly, I've been documenting every act of corruption, every abuse of power, every dollar stolen from this company and its people. No one spoke. No one could. Grant stood up suddenly, his fists clenched. You can't do this. I'm the vice president. You were. I cut in my voice sharper than steel. Until 5 minutes ago. I pulled a stack of papers from my folder and slid them across the table. Termination notices, signed, sealed, delivered. Effective immediately. You and everyone named on those pages are fired. You will be escorted out. Your access has already been revoked. Right on cue, security entered the room. 2 men in black suits stepped behind Grant and his cronies. Calm, silent, unshakable. Grant's face went pale. You think you can erase me, he hissed. You need me. This is my company, too. I stood, and for the first time in years, I let him see the truth in my eyes. No, Grant, this company was never yours. It was mine before you stepped through the door, and it will be mine long after you're gone. The silence that followed was deafening. One by one, the men who had mocked me underestimated me, built their careers off. My silence were escorted out. Some didn't make eye contact. Others looked like they wanted to speak, but what could they say? They never even knew who they were working for. And Grant. Grant looked back one last time, eyes hollow, lips tight, the weight of his fall just beginning to settle in. He was no longer the golden boy, no longer the king of someone else's empire. He was just a man who'd played the wrong game with the wrong woman and lost. The empire was reclaimed. But the real work was just beginning. The day Grant and his inner circle were escorted out, a strange silence settled over Carter Technologies. Not the kind of silence that follows disaster, the kind that precedes rebirth. For the first time in years, the halls weren't thick with intimidation or empty bravado. People whispered at first, unsure of what had just happened, unsure of what came next. But word spread fast. And soon the truth was impossible to ignore. The woman they had seen as the VP's wife, the one who had smiled politely and stayed in the background, was actually the founder, the architect, the power behind it all. Me, Madeline Carter. And I wasn't done. My first order of business was an internal audit of leadership. Every executive who had enabled Grant, whether through silence or cowardice, was let go. No exceptions. No favoritism. If you protected corruption, you had no place in my company. But I didn't just burn the old foundation. I rebuilt it. I reached out to former employees who'd been sidelined or driven out. I made personal calls, wrote handwritten letters. I didn't offer jobs, I offered justice. One of the first to return was Naomi Brooks. When I called her and asked her to come back, not just as an engineer but as head of innovation, she went silent for nearly a full minute. You really want me? She asked. After everything they said, Naomi, I told her, because of everything they said. Watching her walk through the glass doors again, her shoulders squared, her eyes sharp. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. She wasn't the only one. Designers, analysts, programmers, people who had been ignored or undermined, they were the ones I called first. They came back not out of obligation, but because they still believed in what we once stood for. We rewrote the policies. We created anonymous reporting systems. We held leadership accountable, really accountable. I started a mentorship initiative for women and underrepresented voices. We hosted monthly open forums. We launched new leadership training, rooted in empathy, not hierarchy. For the first time, Carter Technologies wasn't just a company, it was a community. I'll never forget the moment it all hit me late one night, maybe a month after the purge. I was walking past the break room, and there they were, Naomi and her new team, brainstorming over whiteboards, laughing, arguing, building. No fear, no tension, just ideas. And I realized, this is what we were always meant to be. The press had a field day with Grant's fall, the empire that betrayed its queen. CEO wife reveals she was the CEO all along, from boardroom to sales floor. The fall of Grant Carter's social media went wild. People dissected every detail, speculated about what I knew when I knew it. Some whispered that Grant had married me just to get ahead. Others said he always resented the idea of a woman having more power than him. I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. All I knew was this Grant now worked part-time at a small electronics chain on the outskirts of Austin. Word had it, he wore a red polo shirt and avoided eye contact with customers. A man who once commanded boardrooms, now stuck resetting shelves in aisle 7. People asked me if I felt satisfied. Honestly, that was never the goal. I didn't expose Grant for revenge. I did it for justice. For the people who deserved better. For the dream I'd almost let rot. 6 months later, I stood by my office window watching the lights of the city flicker across the skyline. Inside, Carter Technologies buzzed with life. Teams stayed late because they wanted to. New projects thrived. Investors returned. We had just closed a deal with a major European software firm, our biggest to date. Naomi's AI team had developed a groundbreaking product that was drawing global attention. But what stayed with me wasn't the headlines. It was the way our people walked now, heads held high, smiles that reached the eyes. No fear, just focus. Late at night, when I was alone with my thoughts, I sometimes remembered the woman I used to be, the one who smiled politely at that dinner table while her husband mocked her, who sipped wine and swallowed her pride just to protect the illusion of peace. That woman, she's gone. And good riddance. I had reclaimed more than a company. I had reclaimed myself. I had proven something not just to them, but to every woman who's ever been told to be quiet, to play small, to sit pretty. We are more than enough, and we're not asking for a seat at the table anymore. We're building the damn table. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who claimed to love you or watched someone mistake your silence for weakness? Share your story below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep fighting for your voice. Someone's listening.